we will start with public comment, and same rules as Mr. Kraus read for public comment. Any public comment?
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. I thought we were going to review the middle school results. We talked about that at the last curriculum meeting.
Is that your only question?
Yeah, I don't see it on the agenda here, unless it's got some other.
Yeah. Update on school improvement plans.
Well, I saw that, but that's not a review of the actual results. That's what we talked about, was a review of the actual results for last year on the PSSA scores.
Yeah, so we have in November, we reviewed the PSSA results and the keystones. Tonight is talking about what the district is
November
doing.
was the high school only.
Yeah, Mrs. Furlong, I'm not going to debate that fact with you. So tonight on the agenda is what the district has been doing to work to address the scores.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else have public comment? All right, first item on the agenda is the writing program adoption. Mrs. Washam.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Washam. I'm the Humanities and Federal Programs Supervisor for the district. And today I'm going to walk through our program improvement proposal for being a writer for the adoption. First and foremost, I just want to thank the staff and Dr. Riley, the principal of West Rock Hill, for being such a fantastic group of people to collaborate with my first program improvement, my first pilot at Pennridge School District. It's been truly a joy for me to be able to collaborate, partner with them, hear their thoughts, and just really dig into writing instruction this year. So I do think that teachers who are willing to do pilots sometimes aren't given as much credit as due. They've been incredibly insightful and gave great feedback and have worked hand in hand with me with going through this. So I'll walk through the overall project, and you guys have had this on hand. I apologize for having the stomach flu in February. But the overall programmatic goals is that it's a writing process, a program resource for writing curriculum that immerses students in different genres of writing through the use of mentor texts. So the idea is that students really get to hear this being read aloud, break apart different genres of reading and writing, and then hear it, write about it, and then develop their own ideas and stories. It also works on having them refine their drafts, work collaboratively. There's a lot of social emotional learning that's explicitly taught within being a writer. There's a large part of collaboration, a large part of giving feedback, constructive feedback to their peers, and then also working together to collaboratively refine their work, both in the editing and the revision process for it. So their instruction really has them work together to refine their pieces to say, is this making sense to my audience? How could I make this better? And how could I have a more elaborate thought and story? For 21st century goals, I said that it's grounded in social emotional learning. It has a lot of collaboration. It actually has students giving direct feedback after they're hearing stories of what they've liked about stories or what they were concerned or had questions about, or how they could maybe incorporate additional strategies they had learned. And then the one thing I think that this writing program has a huge strength is the amount of stamina and the amount that it teaches kids to really love and enjoy writing. Working at West Rock Hill, everyone down to our lowest and most struggling students to our advanced and gifted students have seen a huge increase in their writing stamina, enjoyment of writing, and then the quality of work that they've been producing. So we've done a lot of work at analyzing student resources, of going through their writing process, having them analyze their work, and then having them improve and refine. So I think that from the pilot, we found a lot of great feedback from teachers through surveys, and also we've conducted lesson studies. The lesson studies are embedded professional development that are in this program improvement proposal, that essentially what they'll be doing is watching a consultant teach a lesson, debrief that, and then talk about how that influences their instruction in the classroom. So that's the first part for the course program and grade level goals. On the next two sections, it really just breaks down what the outline is of how the different genres of writing are taught and focused over the course of the grade levels, and the progression of that through kindergarten through 5th grade. And the third page is looking at the writing process and craft of when they're explicitly teaching different ideas, from going through building their stamina for writing, cultivating creativity, conferring in pairs, proofreading and editing. And they also incorporate a lot of reading responses and having them have higher level thought questions of response to reading and writing, whatever the genre of the mentor text that they're working with as well. The last part, or part number for what we've been doing with our writing pilot, we've actually started looking collaboratively at normatively scoring our process writing pieces. We've also have surveyed the teachers. I've done 2 surveys of the teaching staff of how their writing instruction and also their comfort of teaching writing has improved. Throughout both sets of lesson studies, I've had teachers that actually said that they used to despise when they had to come teach writing, and now it's the favorite thing that they love to do. And not only are their students seeing them write and they're conferencing, they're understanding their writers better, they're also seeing students excited to come in to work on writing. I had the privilege of observing, and I had a whole class of 4th grade students moaning at me because they were like, all right, it's time to wrap up your writing, we're going to come back, and they were doing their checks for understanding. They're like, no, we want to keep writing. And I don't get to hear that too often in classrooms. So when I hear that students are excited about what they're doing, we've seen that across the board, K to 5. The estimated costs are outlined in your handout under number 5, and that comes down from the cost of the text and the estimated cost of staff development. The staff development includes online course professional development modules. So there's 6 mini modules ranging from like 25 minutes to 45 minutes. And that actually outlines what being a writer is, how to approach it. It actually stops them and have them go through their resources to sort of dig into it a little bit instead of having a consultant come in to do that part. The consultant comes in and does the job embedded PD of the modeling of the lessons, the planning and the debriefing of that. So the idea would be is that we have the free online coursework that they can do, and currently what we did at West Rock Hill was they worked in their grade level teams, and they'll be doing that again with the program implementation this upcoming year. And then the staff for the lesson study, that occurs twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring. And it's more of the fishbowl lessons that I talked about before, and that's where the cost is for staff development. My projected timeline has changed a little since I submitted this because we've had some very hectic weather. So we've lost a lot of our embedded professional development days, and so I've rescheduled and been working with Dr. Scheid to schedule those into June, and then again in August. Any questions for me at this time? Yeah.
Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about offering any of our school board members to
Oh,
come
yes.
visit the classroom?
So I had met with Dr. Wiley before our lesson study that we had on February 27th with our consultant. And I talked to several teachers who would be excited to have board members come in to observe the writing. I have a schedule, and I can email that out with Dr. Scheid. It's the 14th and the 15th of March. And I've been really excited. So I will be there those days as well to get into some classrooms and get to see it in action, because our teachers at West Rock are really proud of the work that their students are doing in writing. And myself was blown away last Tuesday by 1st graders that were writing multiple pages of expository writing about interviewing their partner and going into great detail, which is really exciting for me as a supervisor to see.
That would be great if you could email the dates.
Yep, I'll send it. It's the 14th and the 15th of March. And I actually have, I worked with Dr. Wiley on their master schedule to allocate different grade levels and different times. So there's a classroom per K to 5.
All through the day?
All through the day, at different times. So I picked varying times of teachers when they were teaching writing, so that depending on schedules of those 2 days, if you're available, we would love to have you.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for all of your time and effort into this, and West Rock Hill for piloting this. I've told you before, I'm super excited about this. I love this program, and I'm really excited to come in and see it. I do have a first grader at West Rock Hill too, and she loves writing, and they had this, she's in first grade, and they had this class pet, this little fake class pet that they take home, and so we're taking it, it was Ash Wednesday, we're at church, so she wanted to see if her little class pet could get Ash on we didn't do that, but she did get to write a little bit about it, and she was so excited, because she thought she was only supposed to write one page, and she's like, I'm only allowed to write this many. I was like, no, it says at least that many. So she was so excited that she could write more than that. So she's really loving the program.
That's great. They've really been producing a lot of great work, and their stamina has increased so much. So that's been a huge relief and excitement for me too. And then also just seeing kids engaged in it has been fantastic.
So how does it work with Reading Street? So I guess Reading Street had a writing program, so we're not going to be using...
Yeah, it had a
so-
writing component within it.
Right, so we won't be using the Reading Street writing component. We'll be using this instead.
Yes.
And then how will the Reading Street and this then work together?
So the West Rock Hill teachers have been working through that this current year, and what we've been really doing is focusing in on the comprehension strategy and also the word analysis during that time. So the phonics and word work within Reading Street's there, and they still have their story. The downside, what Reading Street used to do with writing was a little disjointed and choppy of having very short items that they did for a few days or possibly a week, and then it was left and they moved on to something different. So what we've done is kept the comprehension end and so they're still utilizing their weekly tasks that they've been doing this year in Reading Street, and what they do is that they're just not doing the writing piece of it. So all the comprehension, all the higher level thought question that they have at the end, that's all still there. But they're using the writing for this.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, is there going to be some dialogue between the teachers at West Rock Hill that have been piloting it this year and the other teachers to help
Yeah.
facilitate that? Is that going to be happening at these sessions?
So yeah, it's actually going to be happening in June. So I met with them at their last pathway session last Wednesday, and we actually have teachers who want to act almost as turnkey trainers and supporters as we move forward. So they're going to be also getting trained in a lesson study protocol. So eventually we build in our own people who will be facilitating lesson study instead of paying consultants. But what we're going to do in June is that we're going to have staff be able to go through the online course modules on one of our professional development days. And then the second day is actually split K-2 and then 3-5, and it's a half day with a consultant, and it's a half day with West Rock Hill teachers. Talking about how this really worked for me when I launched my workshop, what I wish I would have known, even down to little logistical things of the way you organize your writer's notebook actually has a very profound impact on how your writing day goes. So those kinds of things I'm working with the West Rock Hill staff to come up with an agenda for, and they'll be able to almost share what went really well for them, what they wish they would have known, or what they want to improve upon in the next school year. So I'm getting to have them have a half day to be able to do that with the staff, K-2 and then 3-5. Just because developmentally K-3-5 is a little bit different than K-2 when it comes to the writing.
How does this tie in, the professional development learning pathways?
Mm-hmm.
Is this an option for them to add, can they build in extra time to work on this in preparation for next year as part of that learning pathway so that they have more time, to prepare for this?
Yeah, the hard thing with the way our calendar is currently constructed with the Wednesdays meetings, we only have one more pathway day in May. That's not devoted to either data analysis, SEL, or PSSA training. So the people who are in West Rock Hill have been using this as a pathway, and we do have, I did offer online digital access to anyone who wants to peruse and look at it during that time, but just due to the construct of the way our calendar is, there aren't a whole lot of pathway days really to devote to it. There's one May 23rd that Dr. Scheid and I were talking about of allocating for the online coursework to give them extra time.
What about for next year? Since you said West Rock Hill is able to do that this year, can the other teachers do that next year? It won't be as helpful as before the year, but...
Yeah, no, we're looking, the curriculum department, and especially the elementary supervisor, Joan Kleza, and I, are really looking at pathway offerings that we've had, and then what would that look like moving forward? Because the amount of time that they had unpacking, it's definitely going to be an offering for them. How much we spread it as a universal one across the board is something that we've discussed but haven't determined yet. But it would definitely be a pathway offering for anyone who chose to do so. And we've done a lot with Google Docs, with keeping lesson plans, unpacking lessons, and having best practices sharing on our Google Drive folder that we've been using for being a writer too.
How is this working into our budget? Do we know?
This is, it's part of the program improvement.
So it's already been assigned?
Yeah.
It's actually the last program improvement proposal.
Okay, great, thank you.
This line, and then we'll have the total.
Great, thank you.
Right, so we need to vote on this, right, at the next meeting. So is everyone fine moving this forward to the next board meeting, right, at the end of March? Sure. Okay, any objections to moving it forward? All right, I don't see any, so this will be an item on our March board meeting. Thank you so much.
All right,
And yeah, look forward to hearing about more about the dates.
Yes.
Come in and visit.
Yes.
I'll send those out tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I'm excited. Thank you, guys.
All right, the next item is the elementary scheduling committee presentation. So Dr. Scheid, are you going to start and then you'll introduce anybody else? Are you going to
Yes.
present?
I will be presenting.
Okay, all right, thank you. Got some exciting things in this presentation.
You know, and I have my friends here. Okay, thanks. I need a good one. Okay, but I need to be talking into that. There we go. Thank you, Mrs. Yardley. Oh,
I should know better. Thank you, Mrs. Yardley. We're very excited to present the Elementary Scheduling Committee presentation this evening. Before I get started, I really want to thank my co-chairs, Mr. Matt Smith and Mrs. Deb Brady. They co-chaired this committee, and as you can see behind me, we have many members of the committee who joined us tonight in support. We also have members of our Health and PE department who also came out this evening, so we thank you all for coming here tonight. I'm going to go through the presentation. I just want to give you kind of a perspective. 2 years ago, we had a middle school scheduling committee. We worked through that, and you've heard much about the outcome of that committee with our new STEM program and world language. Then the high school presented a look at the schedule for the high school. But we hadn't gotten to the elementary schools yet, and there were some questions about some of the things that we could possibly do better at elementary. So this presentation is taking a look at what we currently do and then recommendations by subcommittees. So, the first slide that you see on page 2 are members of the committee, and I'd like to especially thank Mrs. Walters for serving on that committee. Her input was greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. So we had administrators and classroom teachers and specialists. We had invited other parents as well, but we also did not get very lucky with weather, and they were not able to attend. But we were able to move rather quickly, and we had 3 full-day meetings, and we worked every minute of those 3 days. We met on January 8th, January 25th, and we met again on February 8th. I put this slide in there. There are many more slides. What I did was a chronology of each meeting that we met so that we would review the work that we had done prior. And I certainly wasn't able to put all that into this presentation tonight, but I did want to let you know how we got started. So we got started out who was in the room just so that we all knew one another. And we talked about one word that would describe your most memorable moment as a teacher. And as you can see all those wonderful words up there, compassion and rewarding and humbled and eureka and magical. So that's how we feel about teaching. That's how we feel about students. So then I shifted it.
and the next,
The next question was, what's a word that describes the elementary schedule? see the words up there. What we found was the schedule presents a problem to all the stakeholders in the room. Those words were, it's scattered, it's confounding, it's hectic, it's puzzling, it limits students, and it can be disruptive. So we knew that we all had a common focus starting with day one. So we talked about, well, what are the issues with the current schedule? And we spent a good deal of time on what the issues were. So I categorized them, and I will tell you that the number one issue really was time. It was specialist time. The inconsistent minutes in the specialist schedule presents a problem, and when Matt Smith comes up to talk particularly about that, he'll be able to explain that. But basically, we all looked at that and saw that the current specialist minutes didn't exactly have rhyme or reason. There were 40 minutes, 50 minutes, and they were not consistent. So we all thought that was something we should look at. The pieces didn't fit together in time allotments. There was specialist traveling, there's wasted time there. Days of the week versus cycle days, because middle school and elementary school, if they're sharing any staff, one's on a day cycle, one's on a days of the week cycle. Teachers talked a lot about common planning time and how we all value common planning time and the level of inconsistency with, and common planning time is just, I'm a third grade teacher, there's 3 third grade teachers. Could we have specialists scheduled at the same time so the 3 third grade teachers would be able to work together? That was also an issue. There was just, the next kind of category that we talked about was, it's called win time, and that's, it's an acronym for whatever I need time. It's really an intervention and enrichment time. We talked a lot about that because we know that we have work to do to meet the needs of all students. And there's just so much time in the day. And we have watched elementary principals working very hard, trying to come up with minutes in the day that could be used for intervention and enrichment time. We use whatever I need. It's not called whatever I need in every building, but it is called whatever I need in most buildings. So we went with that, and as we continued with that discussion, that's really what we'll call it. You've heard of things possibly called power hour. It's the same effect. So we talked about that. We talked about pullouts and students missing parts of lessons because they have to be pulled out. And this is an age-old problem in elementary schools. Students having to leave for specials, and whether it's an instrument or not, or whether they're getting speech or OT. I mean, there's all different reasons why students are pulled out of the classroom. We talked about gifted, and we focused on some of the things that we thought were areas that we could look at to improve upon. The next big thing that came up in the discussion was second grade swim. And while everyone values second grade swim, I mean, it's a wonderful program here at Pennridge, where we give students in second grade an opportunity to learn how to swim, which is just incredible. But a lot of discussion was had about the disadvantages of that, especially with, it creates challenges that all the specials in second grade have to be at the end of the school day, and then the building principals have to create their schedules around it. Then there's traveling back and forth and trying to find, to ensure a faculty for swimming and parent helpers, and there was a lot of time spent on that. So while that's a really sensitive subject, because we broached this one before, and it's something that is valued in Pennridge. And all things being equal, I mean, it is a wonderful thing to offer for students. But when we looked at the balance of the advantages versus the disadvantages, the group thought the disadvantages outweighed that. So we do have that in the PowerPoint, in the presentation, to talk about possible other options for second graders to be able to be to have the opportunity to learn how to swim in second grade too. So it's not like we just didn't give it any consideration. You will see what we talked about that, but that did come up. It did, it was something that people were passionate about. And then we had, if you go to the next slide on page 6, teacher collaboration. We talked a lot about teachers needing time to collaborate. And then we talked about health not being taught by health teachers. This is something that I've been working with and having conversations with our coordinators for at least a year, just in terms of why health was being taught to our students at the primary level by the health and PE teachers, but at the 4th and 5th grade by the classroom teachers, and there were just inconsistencies, not really thinking that that was the best model either, so that's what we wanted to look at as well. So after we spent quite some time looking at the things that we thought really were areas of need where we thought we should address, the next thing we looked at, the next slide, that's on page 7, what were the possibilities? Now I didn't list, all of the possibilities, but these are the major possibilities by title that we came up with as the committee. So what you can see there is what ends up being focus groups for the committee. So we thought things about, or we considered specials should have the same number of minutes. We talked about maybe adding a 5th special. We've already had the discussion about the librarians. If we add 2 librarians, and there's a librarian in every school, then we would be able to move the computer ed curriculum partially to the librarians, which would leave that either whatever minutes it turns out to be, but we'll call it for tonight 45 minutes. So what could we do with a block of time in the teacher's day, in the student's day for 45 minutes approximately? So we talked about that. We talked a lot about world language, about foreign language. We talked about offering foreign language to all students in the elementary level. What could that look like? Could that be a special? Could that be something that we should offer kindergarten through 5th grade, 1st through 5th grade? We also, Nate Storb, he's here tonight, he's one of our French teachers. He and I went out to Southern Lehigh. We went out to Liberty Bell Elementary School where they have been running an immersion program, a world language immersion program for 29 years. So we visited that school, we learned a lot about immersion. So another option would be an immersion program. And immersion is different than but offering world language as a special. So what makes immersion special, I'll talk a lot more about it later, but just to help you have a distinction between the two, an immersion program is actually a program where students come to school, they're taught by a native, and we'll say for our program, Spanish-speaking teacher. And they are literally taught in Spanish for all their 4 core subjects, and I will tell you, it was an amazing thing to see. We went from 3rd grade down to 2nd to 1st graders, and so they're speaking Spanish and listening to Spanish all day with the exception of when they're at lunch and specials. So we'll talk more about that. We also talked about adding minutes to the core. Could we add minutes to the core? Where do we find time consistently across all buildings for interventions? So that became a focus group. We talked about traveling teachers needing to be integrated into the buildings. Specialists talk a lot about not feeling a part of the buildings, and they're moving from one building to the other, but they want to be part of the building, and how do we make that work with our time? We talked about the consistent win, the 2nd grade swimming, and we also talked about, although we're not going to talk a lot about this one tonight, but we started this conversation. And I think maybe Dr. Arnell, you may remember we talked about this a little bit before, about a humanities block and really kind of integrating our ELA with social studies. We didn't move too far with that, but I just wanted to put that out there because that's something that we're going to continue to consider. So on the next page, page 8, you'll see the actual focus groups, and then you'll see the staff members and board members who were a part of each focus group. So these groups, after we made these decisions, these groups worked collectively to do the research, to collaborate, to bring their ideas back to the full group, to have more discussions, and then they were sent back to make actual recommendations. So there was a lot of work involved in here, and there was research involved in here, and there was travel involved. So I do, again, want to thank everyone for their hard work. So if we go to the next slide, our first focus group looked at the schedule cycle and consistent minutes. And I will hand this one over to Mr. Smith, who will show you what the current cycle looks like for specialists and the recommendations from the committee.
Yeah, thank you. So good evening, everyone. What I want to briefly go over, the part of the committee that I worked with was kind of looking at the nuts and bolts of how we would schedule some of these things. And I was actually the person that contributed jagged to the list of words, because as I schedule part of what we work with, and some of it's represented on the slide that you're looking at, but are some times that don't fit together extraordinarily well when you're trying to put pieces together. So our specials minutes allocations, which you can see on this slide, you can see, if I think fourth grade is particularly good to look at. You can see specials that range from 50 minutes to 20 minutes long. And so to try to put together a specials block with those kinds of discrepancies in time is challenging. We had a scheduling consultant in, I think, early last summer, and when we showed him this, he asked us why we would do that, and we tried to explain it to him. Usually when you're scheduling, you're trying to work with chunks of time that are at most quarter-hour chunks, so 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 30 minutes, so that the pieces fit together well. To have 50 minutes and 20-minute chunks really creates a lot of challenges. So the group that I was working with, I think, was seeking to balance this out and also pay attention to the recommendations of other groups. So we're focus group 1, but we were largely receiving information from the other focus groups and trying to help that and let that inform our decisions and our recommendations when it came to time allocations. I would say beyond this chart, we do have time allocations and things like social studies and science that are 50 minutes at the primary level and then become 70 minutes at the intermediate level, that I think we're looking to round off some of those sharp edges to help them all fit together together better. We also wanted to come up with a rotation that would allow people who are most qualified to teach a subject to teach it. I know Dr. Shai just alluded to health teachers teaching health in grades 1 through 5. We currently have classroom teachers doing 4th and 5th grade. So we're trying to come up with recommendations that would allow for those specialists to teach the subjects that they're most qualified to teach. So if I can go to the next slide, what we were suggesting was a model that would have a 45-minute specials block and a rotation that would include what I would refer to as 4 core specials that we've always had: art, library, music, and physical education, and then a 5th that would be a combination of STEM, world language, which will be detailed more later in the presentation. That on the surface looks like more total minutes for specials, but it would remove some of the burden of teaching computer ed once a cycle, which chews into some of the core time, and health with the classroom teacher, which also chews into some of the core time as well. So there's more details about that, but primarily what we were seeking to do was to create a common time that would be easier to work with from a scheduling standpoint, and also integrate some of the opportunities that the committee saw and recommended into that special. You can see at the bottom that the recommendation would be that health would be scheduled to meet 13 times through the school year. The recommendation we currently have is that it be integrated into the enrichment intervention blocks, and it would scroll through about once every 3 weeks. I don't know that we would run it that way, but that's how often it would need to run to have 13 meetings. This would allow us to schedule the health phys ed teachers to teach it as well outside of the times that we're scheduling the specials block. So I think this this model represents the varied recommendations of the committee, some of which you'll get more detail of as we go on. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Shai.
Dr. Shai, do you want people to ask questions about focus group 1 before we move on? I mean, just briefly.
Yes, Yes, actually, you're reading my mind. I was thinking the exact same thing. So, yes, does anybody have any questions about focus group 1 and the recommendations for minutes? Dr. Yerno?
As I'm sure most of you know in the audience, because you are members of our staff, the slide that was presented as to the current specials is actually part of your contract, and therefore is something that needs to be negotiated to change. We are presently, as you presumably know, working with the PEA in terms of trying to negotiate a new contract, and this is obviously an issue that the board has interest in changing. My recommendation would be that for those of you who are elementary teachers, that you present that to your association leadership and try to get them to be willing to negotiate that either out of the contract or certainly to a more flexible stance than what is there currently. So that's something I want to note. I also want to note that it's been there forever as far as I can tell, at least as long as I've been involved with the board. It's something that seems somewhat sacrosanct for some reason. I don't know the reason for that. Hopefully this is the time and the place to make that change and to make it easier for everyone and make it more fair for all the different teachers who do the specials work. I'm also very glad to see that the library teachers are involved in this, and by that I mean that we can restaff the libraries in the elementary schools. As I mentioned before, I think it's a sad commentary when you go into an elementary school, and I've done this several times recently, and see a closeted library basically shuttered because the particular individual who's the librarian there on a part-time basis isn't there that particular day. So I hope we can make that come to pass as well. Thank you.
I just have a question on the IE and the health lessons. How would that be integrated? So health would be 13 times, and the IE would be on the days that we don't have health?
I'll do it.
Oh, sorry about that. It's been a while. So what we're looking at, the model we're looking at, we would have an intervention block or win time every day for 45 minutes.
Okay.
So a particular class might have health during that block once every 3 weeks.
Okay.
So once every 3 weeks, a single class would take a break from that win time to have their health lesson.
That's what I'm saying. So every third week or whatever.
Right, yeah, and we might do it, I don't know that we would do it every third week, we might do it.
Well, how do you do it?
trimester, but
But
yeah.
for that block of time, then no child receives intervention.
In that particular class,
In that particular
yeah, so
class.
that would just be a break from the intervention block once every 3 weeks for a health lesson.
Okay. And one other question. What is counseling as a special?
So, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so, and I think what's a little deceptive about the first slide, I'll go back to it really quickly, is it could lead you to believe that we only have guidance counseling as a course in 4th grade for 20 minutes a day, but that's not in fact true. It's just that's the only time it's included in that specials rotation to account for its contribution to the 200 total minutes. So we have 8 guidance lessons at a minimum in each grade level. And one of the recommendations of the committee is to keep that out of the special schedule, just because of the nature of a guidance counselor's job. To have it scheduled at a specific time is tricky, because you could have an issue that's arising with a student who has needs, at the exact moment where they're supposed to be delivering instruction. So to have that flexibility is a nice thing.
So the counseling, what it looks like is the counselor comes into the classroom, or you're pulling students out. Oh, you see a head shake. Is that what it is? So you're coming in doing group lessons? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Your teacher's already in.
Thank you. Oh, there she is. She was on the committee.
Any other comments, questions before we move on?
I have a question. First, thank you everybody for doing this. This was like another one of my favorite things, so this is a great night for me. But my only question, the intervention and enrichment period, can you explain a little bit about how that's structured? You said that's every day, and then do we have kids shifting from one teacher to the other, like based on whether or not they need enrichment in certain areas or remediation in certain areas? Do we have people pushing in? Do we have aides that are coming in and helping? Like, how is that structured?
I would say right now there's some subtle differences from building to building, and I would say given that this is a good example of what our schedule looks like right now. If you use the district-defined time allocations for core subjects, your math, reading, science, social studies, in conjunction with the specials minutes, you have time in the day where you can schedule an enrichment block in grades 1 through 4. But 5th grade, this is a charming Pennridge thing. 5th grade, you actually have more allocated minutes than you do the 405 minutes in the day. So that's, I think, part of the need to redefine some of these things. But where principals have been able to wedge out that time, it's largely as you just described, where it's really kind of an all hands on deck approach as far as the people that are available. I know in my building, we also target a lot of our supports reading, supports Title I, some of our English second language supports that take place for those times, so that it's a predictable time for teachers to know that they're not going to cover new curriculum necessarily. They can also back in their classrooms work in small groups. So I think that what I need moniker is a good one, because it allows personnel to really focus on the needs of the student and step away from core instruction. Depending on how buildings are staffed, some have more TAs. My building's a good example. I have English second language teachers that get involved in that time and providing some services. But that's basically, the question that you have just describes what we're trying to do, which is match students' needs up with personnel who can help them focus on those needs.
So would that be combining like all of the first grades together, they would be working together, or it's going to be individually in each classroom?
Yeah, I think it would actually be more, in many cases, breaking them apart further beyond their classrooms. It could be some recombining, but you might be having groups from within a classroom working on different things at the same time, and possibly with different personnel. Could be with a specialist, like a reading specialist, or or an IST who's providing some math support. I have a Title I aide in my building that provides some math support that will push in during those times and work with small groups of students. So it's usually breaking into smaller groups.
So I guess each building principal is going to try to stagger those times so that additional personnel can push into each grade level. Is that?
Yeah, I'm going to let Mrs. Brady, I would agree that that's what I would be seeking to do, but I'll let Mrs. Brady come up as well.
So we can share. Yes, I think that's exactly what the plan is. The other thing is, I'm sure a lot of you've heard that it's very difficult. We actually, Dr. Scheid said earlier, band lessons, chorus, and things like that. This time could be used to also have some of those children go out for lessons, because right now what happens is, even though we try to rotate, because we have, for example, at my building, my strings instructor also works at North Middle School. So she has a very restricted time that she can come to the building, which means on a Tuesday, she's there for 2.5 hours. So any child that has a lesson on a Tuesday consistently misses the same core subject. So if we were able to work this out, hopefully we'd be able to look at the big scheduling of different specialists. That's what we were talking about, different cycles versus days of the week. That may also give us some time to say, okay, during this win time, these students are going out, similar to what the middle school does. Also, we've looked at, I know in my building, we've tried to get gifted support to push in. So if that could be a push-in time for gifted support, you could provide your enrichment. You could provide, if your reading support teacher can go in, you can get your reading support in there. We talked about if there's extra specialists available, they could also push in. So all hands on deck. And if we look at that, so first grade always has first period of the day. Maybe second grade has its second period of the day. That would also allow us to create their schedules so that it's more consistent, and they can say, okay, I'm working with all the first graders during this time, I'm going to move to second grade. So it just has a lot of advantages that right now we are trying to do, but as you can see, when you have some people with a 20-minute special versus a 55, it just makes it more challenging. So we're trying to get it more uniform so we can meet the needs of all the students on a more consistent basis.
Okay, we need to wrap it up. So Mrs. Cullen has a question, and then we're going to move on. And if you want to ask them at the end, jot it down, because we are on slide 10 out of 32. So,
Okay.
so just really a quick question, we can move on. And I think we have, what, 7 more focus groups? This is the first one.
This
So,
is the first one.
If
It's
you
a
can
big
just jot
one.
it down and save it for the end, we can answer all the questions.
I noticed that you have STEM and world language, you're putting my 2 favorite things at odds with one another, that they're going to share the 5-day cycle. I just wondered if you had any talks about which one would get, if there's 5 days, one's going to get 3 and the other's going to get 2, or are you going to?
Mrs. Call, we had a lot of discussion about that, and originally we were talking about an A-B schedule, but the more we thought about that, and we'll go into that a little as we go into this presentation, the more we thought about that, the more we all agreed that that would not serve our students best. So this would really be more semester-based. So you would take a full semester of the world language, and then you'd have the full semester of STEM, as opposed to the AP, which would cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah, it would, but
Yes.
thank you for putting the world language in. When Mrs. Miller said she did a happy dance for the extra staff for technology, that was what I was doing when I was reading the Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to,
Spanish.
there you go. Okay. So, and I know we have, Rebecca, you're here tonight too, and Nate, if you want to come up here, that's perfectly fine. And I will give the credit right here to Rebecca Wildrick, who was our coordinator for world language, and Nate Straub, who was a French teacher. And even though Nate and I went out there to take a look at the Immersion program, which again was just absolutely an amazing thing to see, walking into a 3rd grade classroom, right Nate? We walk into a 3rd grade classroom and these 3rd graders are speaking totally in Spanish and they're debating grammar, as I recall, because you understood more than I did. And it was just like, wow, I mean really, how did that happen? So then when we went to 1st grade, that was more 1st graders understanding the teacher, not speaking as much, but absolutely understanding what's going on. And it is just a remarkable program. So what we did, like I said before, is we looked at both. What is the value of the Spanish Immersion program? And I will not do it justice as Rebecca and Nate would. So do you want to do just a brief overview of the advantages of an immersion program? Nate? Okay.
Really, it's just that the students become bilingual at a very young age, and they are immersed in the language, and so at that age, they're just sponges, and so they develop the language very quickly in a very natural way, and it also improves, being bilingual improves a lot of your skills in other areas as well. And the other thing that I note, well, I actually did my master's thesis on immersion programs, and one of the things that is always a concern is that because they're not hearing as much English, they're not learning English as much as the other students, that their English language would fall behind. But actually, when formal English instruction is introduced, they actually do much better than other students that have not been in the bilingual program because of their exposure to the other language. Plus also, they're hearing English everywhere else, so it's not like they don't hear English at all. So there are other things you want to add? Do you want to add anything to that? No? Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
There's a lot of work to be done for the immersion program. Like we said, Southern Lehigh has had this program for 29 years, so they have answered a lot of questions, and they know what works, and They were very generous with their time and gave us a lot of information, gave us a lot to think about. So this would be something that we would look for planning for all of next year. This would not be something that we would be recommending that we would be prepared for next year. There's a lot of work to be done with that. But the benefits are amazing. And the research is up there. I'm not going to read all of that out loud. But the research is out there. It cognitively, the benefits are there, socially, emotionally, culturally. I mean, there's just a lot of benefit. And here's really just a quick, interesting story. So Southern Lehigh, they decide they're going to have the immersion program 29 years ago. The building principal starts telling us a story about how the parents in the community camp out because it got so popular that they had to do a lottery system. And like concerts, parents would stay there overnight, and it just got to be it's so overwhelmingly popular. So we have our work to do in terms of that, whether we want to go with a lottery system. It does make sense, you need to limit it. Certainly, there'd be more to come with this, but we did want to let you know that we did do visitations and we did do research, and we really believe that this would be a very big advantage for our students. And this is again and this is slide 13, but this is again the best way to learn language, and Rebecca already did that. So why Spanish? Because it's immediately relevant language here in our country, so Spanish made sense. Why 2019? Because we really do need the time to make sure that we do this right. We did talk about, and here's where
I remember my glasses, but I cannot see.
Okay, so you need native speaking Spanish teachers for this program. So you have to have a native Spanish speaker, so we would need to find teachers as such. They were able to at Southern Lehigh, that's what we would have to do. Over 5 years, we would need 5 Spanish-speaking elementary certified staff. We were, considering instructional aides. They have instructional aides at their school. What was interesting, though, is the curriculum materials are the same. So it's not that you need different curriculum materials because the curriculum that we use all comes in Spanish, so that would not be a difference for us. What we would need is a facility. There would need to be a host school. So the host school would have to have building space, year one classroom, and so on. So we would need to study that to make sure that we had one building that could house the program for grades 1 through 5. We also know that the next slide, slide 15 again, is talking about the things that we need to do. We would need the whole year to make sure that that happens. Okay. There was one more thing I wanted to make sure. Okay, so that would be for the immersion program. But then we looked at exploratory Spanish as a special. So these would be students who, by lottery or whatever way that we would do that, would be a part of this immersion program. But what would all the other students, what benefit could we bring them, those students? And that's when we looked at exploratory Spanish as a special, which would be a semester. So you would have Spanish, and then you would have STEM, and I'll talk more about STEM. We do know that offering Spanish at the elementary level, the advantages are clear, but it does impact your middle school program, and we talked about that. So we thought implement Spanish exploratory program. We would be able to get this up and running if this was approved by the board. We would be able to get the curriculum. We can talk about that. That's on another slide. We have our neighbors in Quakertown who have already done this. We have CB who have already done this, and I've talked to them. Rebecca has talked to them. We certainly have an expert on our own board with Mrs. Yardley. I mean, we have expertise that we can tap into. So even though that says add exploratory Spanish in rotation, it would be semesters, and then all grades would begin the first year curriculum and then an additional level, because when you offer it the first time, everybody's a first time learner. So we would adjust the curriculum accordingly. And we would be looking to, it would take at least 2 new full-time Spanish teachers. This is the curriculum that Quakertown uses, and this is what we would recommend to start with, so you can see the cost there. So that would be about $5,000 for the curriculum.
This is slide 18.
Slide 18, yes, I'm sorry, I'm going through these quickly. Slide 18. And then slide 19, it would be 2 additional staff. Honestly, when Matt Smith was really working these numbers, and 2.2 keeps coming up, and that would be impossible to staff at a 2.2. We'd be looking at the 2 staff and then work with adjustments. We do know that there's implications. If we start Spanish at elementary school, it's going to impact middle school and high school. So we considered starting 2020 students who receive 1 year of exploratory Spanish in 5th grade will enter 7th grade where the exploratory language is already taught. So options offer Spanish 1 starting 7th grade, possibly having exploratory language given overview and only French and German. Add a 3rd language to replace exploratory Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, Portuguese, Italian. There's options out there. Or move exploratory French and German to combine with 6th grade in the Latin program. So these are things that we've considered, but have not made a final recommendation. And then starting 2024, Spanish immersion students would enter the middle and high school programs. Students could pursue other language. We could offer higher level Spanish classes to those students. AP Spanish classes at the high school level, which we already do. We did talk to the principal at Liberty Bell, and he said a good deal of the students who were in the immersion program go on to continue studying Spanish, where some other students take, and they do offer like Arabic and Japanese and other languages when they get to the high school, because we did have questions. But in general, we do acknowledge that a more robust elementary level will eventually drive level 1 classes to start earlier than 8th grade. So we do have a forward look on there and have some considerations and some ideas. Any questions on immersion or Spanish as a special, semester special?
I just want to start off by saying thank you. And I came onto the board in 2007, and this is one of the things that I pushed for and asked for. And so it's only taken 11 years, but I am beyond thrilled. And we even had a meeting, we had a curriculum meeting, I think it was like 2009, around there or so. Mrs. Wildrick was there, I know, when we talked about how we could expand language. And we found no way, there was, just the way things were at the time, there was no way to expand language. So I am just thrilled. I think this will be a huge benefit to our students, having the, for all the reasons you said, the, having the language in the elementary school, that it's more, and it said on one slide, they're not going to come out fluent, but they're going to learn so many more skills. And the studies show that, students who learn another language will, they improve their English skills, and they see things from a different way, and it benefits them in many ways. And the immersion program, I'm just thrilled. I don't have any questions at the moment. So I don't know who has questions.
I have questions, but are we supposed to wait? I thought you wanted to wait till the end for questions.
No, we're going to do each focus group. And then I just said I put a limit on the one, and I said then we'll take other questions. So yeah, you can have a question. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Yarnell.
I have a question. Southern Lehigh, since they've done this for so long, what, if anything, have they given up? Or what have they diminished?
Yes.
Because there's obviously, for the immersion program in particular, there's obviously a chunk of time that you must devote to something like this. So what else gives way to get to that point?
You can jump in because, do you want to answer the question or?
Well, I know that to start off, Dr. Yarnell, the students in the immersion classes score higher than any students in the building, so they're not giving up academic rigor in any way, shape, or form. Their students are actually in classes like everyone else, and they're taking their 4 cores in a class like everyone else. It's just Spanish speaking. The other students they go to special together. There's nothing different about their day other than it's spoken in Spanish for their 4 core subjects. And Nate, if you want to add?
Yeah, that's basically it. Immersion, we could say, as far as scheduling goes, immersion is one of the easier things to implement in that everything stays the same. The program for the elementary schoolers is entirely the same, except they're speaking Spanish. So it is, as far as specials, you're not trying to fit in an extra special in a day that's already full. Everything else stays the same. So, granted, it is a much more complicated, ambitious program to implement than just having a special, in that you're hiring people and finding curriculum and the facilities and things like that. But as far as scheduling goes, it's fairly simple.
Other questions? Yeah.
So what you're saying is you're gonna have 25 kids basically that go through this from first through, up through 5th grade, right?
Well, that would
In
be the
one building?
first group. So it would start out with first grade, you can put 25, they use 30 as their number. So you would start out with a group of 25 students, you want to use that number right now, in first grade, right?